Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. All praise be to Allah, the Lord of the heavens and the earth, and peace and blessings be upon our beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Dear brothers and sisters, I salute you all with the salutation of the people of paradise. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Please join me in welcoming my distinguished guest, Sheikh Kahlan bin Nabhan al-Kharusi, the Assistant Grand Mufti of the Sultanate of Oman. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, Brother Hatim. And I would like as well to greet our audience. May Allah the Almighty guide us all to the right path and enrich our knowledge in His religion and shower our lives with His mercy.
Sheikh, we have another list of questions today, and we'll try and cover most of them, inshallah.
Inshallah.
The first question says, many Muslims enter the masjid or the mosque and talk about worldly matters, and many times they disturb other worshippers. What advice can you give to those people?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All praise be to Allah, peace and blessings be upon His last messenger. Now we all know that mosques are the houses of Allah on earth. So they are sacred places. As far as our religion is concerned with mosques, they are built and constructed for a sacred purpose, and that is to worship Allah the Almighty alone, to glorify Him, to perform what He has commanded us to perform of the duties that are assigned to mosques. And that's why we find many prophetic traditions in which Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam explicitly warned Muslims against particular acts and deeds that are of a worldly nature, because these places are not relevant to such worldly acts and deeds. They are constructed and built for Muslims to glorify Allah the Almighty, to worship Him, to recite the Holy Quran, to make supplications and prayers, to perform the obligatory prayers, that the congregational prayers and the voluntary prayers that Muslims are performing inside the mosques. And of course, having all these meanings attached to our hearts definitely is going to lead us to appreciate these sacred places and to admire what we are doing and performing inside these mosques. And that's why, as I said earlier, particular acts and deeds are forbidden to be done inside the mosques. Let's have a look at these forbidden acts or disliked acts. One of them is to conduct financial affairs inside mosques. This is absolutely forbidden, because they are not markets, they are not souqs, as Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has clearly clarified. And now if we look at the point behind such ruling, then easily we can conclude that because conducting financial deals inside mosques is one of the acts that are not relevant of what is supposed to be done inside mosques. Another forbidden act is to search for lost items inside mosques. Let's assume that a person lost any of his stuff inside the mosque, even if he thinks, he or she thinks, or most probably he thinks that he lost his stuff inside the mosque, then he is not allowed to search for that item loudly inside the mosque, not to ask other persons performing their prayers or attending to the mosque about his lost item. He can announce outside the mosque, but not inside the mosque. Again, this is to confirm the spiritual status and the sacred status of mosques in Islam. A third forbidden act is to make mosques as routes for Muslims. It is not allowed to enter a mosque just to have shortcuts to reach another destiny. If there are, let's assume, 2 doors, 2 gates for the mosque, and for a person to reach a particular point, rather than going around the mosque, he decides to enter the mosque to make a shortcut to reach his aim. This is not allowed. Indeed, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has warned against making shortcuts, making mosques as shortcuts, and making them as routes, or taking them as route to reach the point that we want to reach. All these traditions, as I said, they are of the same line, which is to confirm the sacred status of mosques. And while we are in the mosque, if we think of all the acts that we are performing inside the mosque, then we will understand that they are all rewarding acts. We are glorifying Allah the Almighty, we are remembering Him, we are reciting the Quran, we are learning or teaching useful knowledge inside the mosques, we are discussing useful matters inside the mosque. All these are duties that can be performed and done inside mosques. But when it comes to socializing, to normal or worldly chatting, to conducting worldly affairs inside mosques, then this is not definitely a rewarding act. These are not rewarding acts. They are, of course, acts that are not relevant to what mosques are constructed for. And that's why we must avoid such worldly matters and worldly chatting and discussions inside mosques. Now let's assume that we do have a worldly matter, but it is very much needed for the society. It is for the interest of the public. Then yes, such discussions can take place in the mosque, providing that they are not going. I mean, these discussions will not and should not disturb worshippers inside the mosque. So they can be at a corner or one side of the mosque. So we can summarize this by making clear that there are 2 conditions. First of all, they are of the public interest. Second, they are limited to the level that is not going to disturb those who are attendants in the mosque, either glorifying Allah, remembering Him, or performing their prayers, or reciting the Holy Quran. So these are the conditions, and this is how we should deal with mosques, and how we should place mosques in our hearts in order to be able to achieve the message of mosques. And indeed, the message of mosques in our societies is a message of glorifying Allah the Almighty and worshipping Him alone, and of course what is to achieve what is for the interest of our societies. Allah Ta'ala knows best.
Thank you, Sheikh.
Inna lillah, inna lillah, inna ilayhi raji'un. 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 أكبر إنا لله إنا لله إنا إليه راجعون إنا لله إنا لله إنا إليه راجعون.
If you have any questions for the show, send your email at k.r@oman-radio.gov.om at k.r@oman-radio.gov.om knowing your religion, or send SMS to 90406. Don't forget to indicate k.r before sending your questions. And for your comments and suggestions, check out our Facebook, Knowing Your Religion.
The next two questions, Sheikh, are related to mosques as well. So I'm going to ask these questions following the answer that you gave.
Please.
The first one says, many people enter the mosque with their mobile phones not on silent mode, and during the congregation prayer, the mobile tone goes off and disturbs the worshippers. What is the Islamic ruling on this case, and what should the mobile owner do in this case? Should he turn it off, or should he continue praying until the end?
Right. The answer is that if we are to place mosques deep in our hearts at the status that Allah the Almighty wants us to place mosques at, and we glorify the status of mosques, and we understand that they are sacred places, then we are going to realize the fact that upon our entrance to mosques, we should forget about this life. We have to open our hearts to Allah the Almighty and attach our hearts to the purpose that we are created for, which is to glorify Allah and to act in accordance to what pleases Him alone, to express our love to Allah the Almighty and express our fear of the Day of Judgment. If we are to do so, then in this case we have to make all the circumstances, to take all the procedures required to avoid any sort of disturbance. And above all is the voices of the mobile phones, or whatever voices and noises that might divert us or disturb us from the status of consciousness or the attention required while we are in the mosques. So we have to put our mobile phones on a silent mode, if not to switch them off totally. When we are flying, let me give this example. When we are flying to a destiny and taking our journey through flights, we are instructed while taking off or landing to switch off our mobiles in order not to disturb the communication systems of the plane. Then we should remember that this is a spiritual journey, and we have to switch off our mobiles in order not to disturb ourselves, not to disturb our consciousness, not to disturb others, the worshippers inside the mosque. And this is the list of the procedures that we need to take care of while we are entering the mosques to perform what we are intending to perform inside mosques. And here we need to cooperate between each other, because it's again the responsibility of the attendants at the mosque to switch off or to make their mobiles at the silent mode, and to remind ourselves as well, to remind our brothers as well. It is also the responsibility of the imam, the one who is leading the prayer, to remind people following him to put their mobile phones at a silent mode. And there is nothing wrong in doing so. So I do urge my brothers who are leading the prayers to remind Muslims who are following them in the prayers, just before commencing the prayer, after the iqamah, to put their mobiles at a silent mode. Now let's assume that a person forgets to do so, and then his mobile rings. Everybody is disturbed, including himself as well. There is nothing wrong in switching it off immediately, because this is an act which is for the benefit of the prayer that he is performing. If he is going to leave it until it is off by itself, then this is going to disturb all the congregation, and I cannot guarantee that some people who are performing the prayer, who are people, they do differ in their temper. Some of them, they have a high temper, and accordingly they get angry immediately, and they might shout, they might stare at the person while they are performing the prayer. So he is going to cause them to render their prayer invalid. So my advice is that they are highly recommended to silence their mobiles immediately, but with the slightest movement required. Upon them discovering the noise or the voice of their mobiles, let them switch off or silence their mobiles, as I said, with the minimum movement required to silence their mobiles.
Sheikh, especially with the funny ringtones nowadays in the mobile phones, and they think the most advisable thing someone could do is make your ringtone a small beep. Even if you forget your mobile phone on in the mosque and it beeps only one, it doesn't disturb anyone else. But people put very funny ringtones, and
sometimes they are very musical, funny songs and musical noises.
Yeah.
And this by itself, although as it is embarrassing, it is also very disturbing. Sometimes it does happen, that we cannot concentrate when we are listening. Even if, let's assume that it is the call of prayer, the adhan. And I don't know why people, they make adhan as their ringtone.
Yeah.
Or sometimes verses from the Holy Quran. And we have discussed this issue. The Quran is not assigned for such a purpose. It needs to be also respected. It needs to be placed at a high status, not to be made as ringtones.
Yeah.
But let's assume that at the best expected example is that we have a mobile phone, and the person, the owner, is having some good wordings or verses from the Holy Quran as his ringtone, and it rings while they are performing the prayer, while the leader, the imam, is reciting the Quran, and then another voice, a recorded voice, reciting verses from the Holy Quran, or making the adhan, the call for prayer, while they are performing the congregational prayer. It is definitely disturbing, and we have to avoid this right from the beginning. But in the case that somebody forgets, he is urged highly to switch it off immediately, as I said, with the minimum movement required to do so.
Sheikh, nowadays there is special applications on the smartphones for prayers. Automatically you can set them when the time of adhan comes. It turns your mobile phone on silent mode automatically, and it keeps it on silent for like 20 minutes or half an hour. You can set it. So, for example, if you enter the mosque and you have forgotten
such applications or services are very useful.
People should make use of technology.
Absolutely. But this isn't the case. Our first advice is let them concentrate and focus on the purpose that they are entering mosques to worship Allah the Almighty, to get more energy, more spiritual energy, to forget about the difficulties that they are facing. It is a station whereby they are refilling their spiritual needs, attach their hearts to Allah the Almighty. So they need to get rid of all these worldly matters. But these advices that we are giving, in the case that somebody is in need of having his mobile with him, so he our advice here is that they should take care of not disturbing the people attending the mosque, make their mobiles at the silent mode. I mean, we are not talking here about, worldly regulations. We are talking about religious matters. These are Islamic rulings regarding how should we behave inside mosques. How should we behave with these new devices and instruments if we are to have them with us inside these sacred houses of Allah the Almighty. Allah Ta'ala knows best.
Thank you, Sheikh.
حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل 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 حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل.
If you have any questions for the show, send your email at k.r@oman-radio.gov.om at k.r@oman-radio.gov.om knowing your religion, or send SMS to 90406. Don't forget to indicate k.r before sending your questions. And for your comments and suggestions, check out our Facebook, Knowing Your Religion.
The next question regarding mosques, Sheikh. The question says, what is the Islamic ruling regarding decorating the mosque with colorful designs on the walls and carpets and lights? Is this permissible or not?
Well, it is. Muslim scholars have differed. Some of them, they say that it is forbidden, it's not allowed to have such colorful decorating for mosques. Others say that this is disliked. If we look around us, it is difficult to claim that it is forbidden, but at the same time, it is not an open permissibility where people can compete which mosque is more colorful, which mosque is more beautiful and more decorated in an expensive manner, as it is an indication of a worldly competition, while we all know that mosques should be in a simple way, should be constructed in a simple way. They are spiritual places. Yes, to an extent where it is part of glorifying Allah the Almighty, of feeling the spirituality of the sphere around us, this can be allowed, but with no exaggeration. Unfortunately, what we are witnessing now is that there is a very, I may call it extreme exaggeration on concentrating on this side, and in many occasions it is at the account of the area required. So congregations will not find enough room, although they are performing their prayer in a well-decorated, very modern decoration, very beautiful, colorful buildings. Yet they cannot feel. They are taken by these decorations, by this beauty of the mosque, by the carpet that they are praying on. And that's why they lose the concentration required. They lose the spirituality that they need to associate while they are performing their prayers. Simplicity is beauty. Let's understand this. And this is in accordance, if we look at the most sacred place, it is the Kaaba. It is the holiest place on earth in accordance to Islamic teachings. So Mecca, the house of Allah in Mecca, is built in a very simple way. And throughout the history of this place, of this house of Allah the Almighty, it has been as simple, yet it is the most glorified, the most sacred place on earth, as I said, in accordance to Islamic teaching. The same thing is also true when we are talking about the early mosques that were built and constructed throughout during the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the first generation. Now, I am not saying that to have some decoration or beauty inside our mosques is not allowed, but what I am talking about is the exaggeration, is the meaningless decorating and attention given to this side, to the extent that it is at the account of being able to gather our intention and gather our spiritual fulfillment while we are inside mosques. And that's why you will see people, they are just taking pictures and photos of the decoration of the mosque or different corners of these mosques all around the world. It is happening. They do lose the real meaning of their presence inside mosques and how to express their admiration to these places. And on the other hand, if a mosque is built in a simple way, they underestimate these mosques. They do not give them the status that they deserve. And this is one of the consequences that must be corrected. We need to understand that it doesn't matter, whether we are performing our prayers in such a decorated mosque or in a simple mosque. As far as it is a mosque, then it serves the purpose of pleasing Allah the Almighty and all the duties that we have talked about and discussed earlier, Brother Hatim.
Thank you, Sheikh. The next question says, what is the ruling when it comes to a husband who doesn't feel jealous towards his wife and allows her to wear whatever she desires and speak to men freely, regardless of Islamic teachings?
Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has warned men, husbands in particular, from being careless of their responsibilities towards their wives. They have been given the responsibility of taking care of their families, and above all, it is to take care of their wives and to maintain the religion of their wives and family members. So if they do not fulfill this responsibility and they fail to recognize the appreciation required for the status given to them by Allah the Almighty, then definitely they are rendering themselves to the anger of Allah the Almighty. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has warned against those who are not paying attention or giving care to their wives, and they just leave them to do whatever they want and to wear whatever they like, without observing the Islamic rulings and the Islamic way of and the Islamic manners. So they are failing in taking care of their responsibilities, and of course they are accountable for such failure in the hereafter, and they are even exposing their families and their family members to displeasing Allah the Almighty. Allah in the Holy Quran says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة. O you who believe, protect yourselves and your wives, your family members, from hellfire, which is fueled by men and stones. So it is indeed a very alarming warning that we find in the Holy Quran, and we must pay attention to this responsibility that is assigned upon our shoulders. If we look at it from psychological point of view, then this is not for the interest of the family. This is not going to cause happiness for the family, because this is displeasing Allah the Almighty, and accordingly it is going to cause the family a lot of discomfort, unhappiness. We have to understand that happiness for families is not based upon wealth. It is based upon being righteous, observing the constructions and commandments of Allah the Almighty, attaching our hearts to fulfilling His commandments, obeying Him, being at the straight path, following the footsteps of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his way of life, returning back to Allah the Almighty if we fail, if we do something wrong, if we displease Him, repenting to Him. These are the real elements of building and constructing a happy family. We need to understand this. I have seen myself many families who are very flexible on this matter, or they are giving compromises on the manners and the Islamic way of conducting such affairs, but they end up unhappy families, divided families, and the worst is that all these are reflected on the way by which they are raising their children. They are negatively affected and influenced by this sort of life. They will end up having generations that are irresponsible, unable to understand the teachings of Islam. They might be exposed to many accusations, although weak and groundless, yet because of such way of raising up children, they might be influenced and affected by these accusations. So we need to take care of all these elements if we are really to establish happy families. Of course, this doesn't mean to avoid the principles of normal life. And one of the principles of normal life is that we are going to have differences, but there is a way of conducting these differences. There are manners and values of how to solve our problems, how to face the challenges that we are going to encounter during our lives. All these must be present. Of course, it is not, I'm not claiming that it is it is the responsibility of husbands alone. But what I am saying here is, although it is a shared responsibility, but when it comes to looking after the family and the way by which the family is raised up and how to raise up the children and how to advise and look after wives, then it is the responsibility of husbands. We may have another occasion in which we give advices also to wives. How should they fulfill their responsibilities towards their husbands and towards their children? Otherwise, I mean, I hope that this meets the concern of our questioner here. Allah Ta'ala knows best.
Thank you, Sheikh.
استغفر الله ونتوب إليك 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 نستغفر 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 الله ونتوب إليك استغفر الله ونتوب إليك.
If you have any questions for the show, send your email at k.r@oman-radio.gov.om at k.r@oman-radio.gov.om, knowing your religion, or send SMS to 90406. Don't forget to indicate k.r before sending your questions. And for your comments and suggestions, check out our Facebook, Knowing Your Religion.
The next question says, what is an endowment, or as known, waqf? What are the rules regulating endowments?
Right. Endowments or waqf are assets that have income, and these assets are assigned to particular beneficiaries. So the income of these assets or properties is assigned to a particular beneficiaries who are going to benefit from the income of these assets. In a simple way, if somebody owns a property and he wants a rewarding act, a rewarding charity, then he is going to assign that particular property or asset as an endowment. Once this asset is recorded as endowment, this means that nobody can change this asset. It cannot be sold, it cannot be put into the market, but the income of that asset, which means that it should be an asset with income. So the income is going to be distributed to the beneficiaries assigned by the donor himself or herself. So the donor in this case is going to determine who are the beneficiaries and what to do with the income. But he cannot touch, he himself, although he was the owner, but upon registering that particular asset as an endowment, then he has no right to change it. It becomes for the sake of Allah the Almighty. The asset is going to be kept and maintained untouched, unless of course there are unusual circumstances that needs to replace this asset with another that is more profiting, that has more income, to be given to beneficiaries. Now many people think that endowments are only to be assigned for religious purposes, and this is not true. It can be for anything, for any societal needs It can be for the poor, for needy people in the society, or for orphans, or for educational purposes, or for health purposes, or for spreading knowledge in the society, for whatever category of people in the society. What is required here is that the beneficiaries must be permanent beneficiaries. So it is not for individuals. It cannot be given for individuals because individuals will die. But it can be for a particular category that is going to be permanent. So if we are talking about poor people in a particular society, this means that it is going to last forever. It is going to be given for this purpose. If it is to publish books, useful books as an example, and it can be, and it has been like that. I mean, this is one of the ways of our endowments here in Oman. So let's stick to this example of publishing books or useful books. Then the income is going to be given to this purpose. If it is for blind people in this, for the blind persons in the society, then in this case it is going to be for this category forever. It cannot be changed unless there is a case of necessity that requires particular procedures to re-evaluate the endowment and to redirect it to another category of beneficiaries. So this is the concept in brief of endowment, and how we should, of course, I mean, there should be people who are looking after the endowment, and because they are looking after the endowment itself might need an income to maintain it, to last, to remain profiting, and this can be, of course, well determined in the statement of making the endowment. Let's assume that endowments, we do not have the supervisor or the authority looking after the endowment. Then in this case it is the responsibility of the state through its defined authorities to look after endowments, whether traditional endowments or modern and contemporary endowments. Allah Ta'ala knows best. I don't know if there is anything about endowments. I mean, this is just the general idea and some of the religious concept associated. Yes, what I wanted to say is that it is not necessarily the beneficiaries to be religious purposes. It can be whatever purposes in the society. Here in Oman, the categories of beneficiaries vary that to the extent that they do cover about more than 140 societal needs that people were competing to search for what is required for the interest of the society, what is needed for the interest of the society, and wherever they find something, they do fulfill that through the endowments.
Thank you, Sheikh. The last question for today says, a house was set as an endowment. The custodians of the house wanted to demolish the house and build a mosque instead. Is this permissible?
Well, no, they cannot, because as I said earlier, we should have an asset, a profiting asset, an asset with an income. So if they are going to change the accommodation to a mosque, then in this case we are not talking about an asset with an income. They can demolish the house if the house is no longer useful, but build from the income or from the savings of this endowment a new building that is more profiting, and then this income is going to be given to the assigned beneficiaries. But if they are going to construct a mosque on the land of the previous endowment, because mosques themselves are endowed places, but they are not endowed to particular category. They are endowed for all Muslims, and once they are constructed and built, because they are sacred places, they cannot be demolished, they cannot be removed from their places. So my suggestion here is that if this house endowed house is no longer useful, then they can demolish it and construct a new house or a new source of income, a new asset, a new property, like a commercial building as an example, even from the savings, previous savings, or from new channels of charity and donations given by people, or through the official and governmental authority responsible for looking after endowments.
Thank you very much, Sheikh Kahlan bin Nabhan Al-Kharusi, the Assistant Grand Mufti of the Sultanate of Oman. See you next week, inshallah,
Inshallah.
Sheikh.
Thank you very much, Brother Hatim.
Dear listeners, I'm your host, Hatim Al-Absalam, signing off for today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.